There are moments in historical research when you stumble on something so unexpectedly efficient, so thoroughly proven across centuries of harsh weather and punishing environments, that you wonder why it disappeared at all. Across medieval Europe, carpenters, shipwrights and rural craftsmen used a wood treatment so powerful that timber buried in soil, exposed to winds or pressed against standing water, could survive for generations without crumbling. Yet, as industrialization spread, this method faded, replaced by chemical shortcuts and fast-processing mills that rewarded speed over longevity. Today, we are piecing it back together from archaeology, surviving structures and the oral traditions of craftsmen who were the last to practice it. And once you grasp how it worked, the effectiveness becomes obvious. This was not a mystical trick. It was deep, practical engineering. The medieval process started by treating the tree as part of the preservation method itself. Rather than cutting trees whenever it was convenient, medieval woodsmen timed their harvests to the natural rhythms of the seasons. In midwinter, when temperatures dropped low enough to halt sap circulation, trees contained far less moisture and sugar. Sap is the food source for fungi and bacteria. Remove it, and you remove the conditions rot depends on. Trees felled during winter produced wood that aged slowly, resisted infestation, and dried evenly. You can test this principle today by cutting a log in cold conditions and standing it upright for a week or two before debarking it. The wood cures far more cleanly than a summer-cut trunk, and its outer fibres tighten without warping. Medieval craftsmen understood this intuitively, and so they treated winter felling as the first line of defence against decay. The shaping of the wood played just as important a role as the timing of the harvest. Medieval beams were rarely used round unless absolutely necessary. Craftsmen stripped off the bark immediately, knowing that bark trapped moisture, slowed drying and attracted pests. Then they hewed the timber into square or rectangular beams using axes and adzes. This wasn't for style. It removed the sapwood, the outer ring that rots first, and exposed the dense heartwood, which naturally resists decay. Hewing also created flat planes that shed water instead of collecting it. Angled faces helped runoff flow downward, preventing the kind of pooling that fuels fungal growth. A survivalist today can adapt this easily. First, you strip the bark, then you cut the wood until you expose the tight inner grain. After that, you shape it so rain can run off, not sit. These steps require no chemicals, only tools and technique, yet, they really do multiply the lifespan of outdoor structures. The controlled charring of the surface created a barrier that fungi, insects and moisture could not penetrate. This is the heart of the medieval method, and it is the part that survived longest in remote areas because of how reliable it was. Craftsmen, would lightly burn the outer surface of their beams and posts, creating this thin layer of carbonized wood. This layer, it works like a shield. Carbon actually deters insects because it lacks nutrients. It also slows the absorption of water, prevents ultraviolet degradation, and, interestingly, it hardens the surface while allowing the inner core to remain flexible. In some regions, this technique was so common that blackened barns and tool handles became a sign of, well, high craftsmanship. The method even appears in cultures with no direct contact, such as Japan, where yakisugi wood still endures centuries later. For practical modern use, well, a small propane torch is enough. You just need to heat the surface until the wood turns black, but not all the way to ash. Once it cools, you brush away the loose soot, and what you're left with is a sealed and hardened outer crust. If you happen to be building fence posts or tool handles for long-term survival storage, honestly, this step alone can extend their lifespan dramatically. The finishing seal of medieval tar and oil gave the wood the endurance that, puzzled archaeologists for decades. After charring came the final layer, which was a coating of natural oils and resins. Medieval craftsmen would heat pine tar, birch tar or linseed oil until it thinned enough to really penetrate deeply into the carbonized surface. The char acted like a sponge, drawing the mixture inward where it cooled and solidified. The result was a flexible but water-resistant shell, capable of withstanding standing moisture, insects, and repeated contact with soil. Grain storage chests preserved with this method were found intact after hundreds of years underground. Harbour pilings coated with tar and char, well, they remained stable long after unprotected wood turned to mush. Anyone replicating this at home can follow a simple process. First, heat a combination of pine tar and linseed oil gently until it becomes runny. Then, brush it into the charred surface while the wood is still warm. You'll want to repeat this after a few hours for deeper saturation. Afterward, just leave it in the sun to cure. That's the whole recipe, yet its effectiveness rivals many modern chemical preservatives. The disappearance of the technique had more to do with industry than with performance. As sawmills spread during the 18th and 19th centuries, uniform boards became the standard. Mills hated tarred and charred wood because it dulled blades and, well, gummed up equipment. Governments discouraged open-flame treatments in towns due to fire risk. Chemical preservatives became profitable. And so the old method quietly slipped away, even though structures built with it continued defying the elements. What industrialization treated as outdated was, in reality, a highly functional form of natural engineering. Applying this medieval secret today gives survivalists and homesteaders an edge that, well, requires no commercial chemicals. If you want posts that survive damp soil, this method works. If you want outbuildings that can handle decades of weathering, char and tar will outperform untreated lumber. And if you want food storage boxes or tool handles that resist insects naturally, this technique is practical and repeatable. A survivalist can even apply a simplified version to makeshift shelters. Clear the bark, char the exterior lightly, oil it with natural fats or resin if nothing else is available. Even in its simplest form, the method dramatically slows the forces of decay. This is the kind of lost knowledge that deserves revival. If you want more historically grounded engineering, survival techniques and forgotten technologies, make sure you subscribe to In the Beginning and share this guide with someone who appreciates real history.